Everyone, my name is Megan, and today I will be presenting my doctoral capstone project titled Thriving Together and Building Brighter Futures. This capstone project is an occupational therapy-led resource and caregiver support model for neurodivergent children in rural Arkansas. Background and need for this program: children with neurodivergent conditions including autism spectrum disorder, attention deficit disorder, attention hyperactivity deficit disorder often require coordinated access to occupational therapy services, speech therapy, physical therapy services, behavioral health services, developmental evaluations, and also caregiver support. Unfortunately, for those families living in these rural communities, they experience significant barriers when attempting to access these services. Research has consistently demonstrated that rural families face shortages when it comes to specialty healthcare providers. They have long travel distances, increased financial burdens, lengthy wait times to even get in to see a provider, as well as fragmented healthcare systems. All of these delay diagnosis as well as intervention for these children. But the barriers extend way beyond the child as well. Caregivers frequently report high levels of stress, isolation, and difficulty navigating available resources. Caregivers of neurodivergent children consistently report unmet needs related to education, respite care, support groups, and financial assistance. Without adequate supports, these disparities may negatively influence children's occupational participation, school performance, emotional regulation, as well as overall quality of life while increasing the caregiver burden. As occupational therapists, we are uniquely positioned to address these challenges through occupation-centered, family-centered, and community-based approaches. The literature review that I completed had many different themes, I guess, that you would say over why this is such a major issue. So the first theme is rural healthcare disparities. Multiple studies demonstrated that children living in rural communities experience delayed diagnosis and decreased access to evidence-based neurodivergent services because of providers' shortages and the geographic isolation. The second theme is caregiver support. High-level evidence from Rechow and colleagues through a systematic review and meta-analysis demonstrated that caregivers' skills training significantly improves caregiver confidence, psychological well-being, parenting knowledge, and family functioning while also improving the developmental outcomes for the child. The next theme is the role of occupational therapy. So occupational therapy practitioners help support participation by addressing sensory processing, sensory needs, daily routines, environmental adaptations, and caregiver education. It is also emphasized that occupational therapy's role is important in improving participation and mental health among children with neurodivergent needs, while also advocating for occupational therapy service throughout their lifespan. The literature also strongly supports sensory integration interventions. Current evidence continues to strengthen the use of air sensory integration within occupational therapy. Contemporary neuroscience supports its theoretical foundation, and a recent randomized controlled research has demonstrated improvements in individualized functional outcomes that are comparable to those through ABA, like applied behavioral analysis. Collectively, these studies provided strong evidence supporting caregiver education, sensory-based interventions, an increase in telehealth services for those geographic isolated areas, as well as occupation-centered programming for the underserved rural populations. So the capstone that I have created is grounded in 3 different frameworks. The first one is the Person Environment Occupation Model, also known as PEO model. It emphasizes that occupational performance is influenced by the interaction between the individual, the environment, and meaningful occupations. This framework is particularly relevant in rural Arkansas because environmental barriers such as transportation, provider shortages, and limited community resources directly affect their participation. The second model is MOHO, also known as Model of Occupation. So MOHO considers the motivation, the routines, habits, performance capacity, and environmental influences when supporting occupational engagement. This model helps guide individualized caregiver education as well as resource development. The third one is the adult learning theory. It provides the educational foundation for caregiver coaching. Adult learners benefit most from education that is practical, relevant, problem-centered, easy to follow, and immediately applicable. Caregiver education materials are designed within this capstone project to promote confidence and long-term implementation of strategies with everyday routines. So rather than implementing a clinical intervention, this capstone focuses more on program development. The primary product is an occupational therapy-led resource access and caregiver support model designed specifically for rural Arkansas. The project includes several integrated components. So the first is caregiver education materials were developed to provide information about sensory processing, self-regulation, environmental modifications, and occupational participation. Secondly, individualized sensory toolkits. Toolkit recommendations have been created. The toolkits include evidence-based sensory regulation strategies, visual supports, movement activities, calming techniques, and environmental adaptations that caregivers are able to incorporate into their daily routines, something that's not going to overwhelm them. The next is telehealth. Telehealth compatible caregiver coaching resources were developed to increase accessibility for families experiencing transportation for geographic barriers. And then finally, a centralized community resource guide was created to assist caregivers with navigating developmental evaluations, therapy services, educational resources, financial assistance programs, and local support organizations. All program materials were developed using current evidence as well as occupational therapy best practices. Because this capstone focused on program development rather than implementation, formal outcome data is not available at this time. However, based on the current evidence, several outcomes can be anticipated when the program is implemented. These would include improved caregiver knowledge and confidence, improved child participation in their meaningful activities, enhanced self-regulation, greater access to occupational therapy and community resources, reduce barriers to specialty services through caregiver education and telehealth compatible supports, and stronger collaboration among healthcare providers, schools, and community organizations. These anticipated outcomes are supported by existing literature on caregiver coaching, sensory integration, and rural healthcare access. So this capstone addresses a significant gap in services. Rather than creating another direct intervention program, this project provides an occupational therapy-informed framework that emphasizes caregiver empowerment, resource navigation, sensory supports, and sustainable community partnerships. I want to thank you for your time and attention, for listening to my capstone presentation, and I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.